I interrupt for a sec? Because
Absolutely.
I've just come on live, so I want to kind of start this from the beginning, if you don't mind. So here we have Dr. Sam Dubé.
Yes, that's right.
Dubé.
Dubé, if you want to be Frenchly correct.
And we're standing in front of the Senate building.
Yes.
And you are a doctor. You're a medical family doctor.
Yeah, I was trained as a family and sports medicine physician, but I work in industry, so I don't do clinical work, and that allowed me a certain amount of flexibility in terms of speaking out. So I haven't gone through the license removal that Dr. Mark Trosey and Dr. Patrick Phillips and many of my colleagues had gone through. That being said, I was a confirmed or tenured faculty member at a university teaching engineering and mathematics prior to that, so I also have a doctorate in mathematics with a background in math and physics. And ironically, I studied that in order to better understand human problems, right? Sure. So I thought one day, hey, why don't I go to medical school and learn what they know? But I was raised in a complementary medicine environment with my family. So that being said, it's given me a pretty eclectic background to try and understand what's been happening to us, especially over the last 4 years.
Plus an analytical background.
That's exactly, you got it, Derek. You got it.
That's exactly.
Because unfortunately, modern medicine doesn't really give you that conceptual, analytical background like an education in the solid sciences, like having to do a master's thesis or a PhD thesis. And so I found that, like going through the curriculum, a lot of it was memorization, and a lot of it was susceptible to change. So here's 10 antibiotics that work for this condition, and then 2 years later, 5 of them change.
Right.
So you have to know how to access information, and you have to be able to follow protocols and heuristics and algorithms as a physician. So physicians are a little more like technicians or mechanics, where they know a lot of what to do in a situation, but they might not necessarily be up to date on the actual science. Right? Yeah, unfortunately. Like for instance, with the statin drugs. That was a huge controversy, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
So you're working with Dr. Trosey, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I consider Mark a good friend, and
okay.
I interviewed him very, very early on. So my background basically is that I started seeing what happened very early before the pandemic was declared. So around November, December of 2019, we had heard about this flu-like virus that was coming out of China. It was in association with the military games there and whatnot. And I was very concerned because we already knew that we couldn't fully trust the mainstream media. And we also knew that we weren't necessarily going to get the unfiltered news from China. And so at the end of January 2020, I was surfing the web late at night and I found a PDF publication of an Indian paper that said we have incontrovertible proof that this virus is essentially the product of a recombinant step, like genetic engineering, because of that furin cleavage site, right?
I'm sorry, where did that come out of?
That, I just surfed the web. It was an Indian research team. 3 days later,
I have
gone.
that.
Good
I have
for
that
you.
document. I've kept it. I'll share it with
Well, I was
everybody.
dumb, and I thought, well, it's going to be here, and I didn't download it, but Lee Merritt, Dr. Lee Merritt has a copy, you got a copy, so it's out there, right? And so that was like, holy crap, what's going on here, And then we saw what happened. It went from a, flu-like virus of, I guess, the term now would be international concern,
Sure.
And then that started popping up, and it was used as an excuse for a lot of different things, and in March of 2020,
It was
we got
a time when
pandemic.
medicine became politics.
We had politically motivated science, policy motivated science, not scientifically motivated policy, unfortunately. So, or you can use the term scientism as well.
Sure.
So, and then we saw what happened with that. And 2 weeks to flatten the curve became indefinite amount of time to eradicate a virus that we all knew. Anyone with a science background, anyone specifically with a virology or immunology background, knew that you can't contain a respiratory illness. You protect the vulnerable populations, like in the Great Barrington Declaration. That's what should have been employed. Protect the elderly and the infirm. Not segregate the children, shut down the schools, social distance, mask everybody to breathe in their own bacteria and CO2, and then mandate an experimental gene therapy injection. And we know what the consequences of that now are, don't we?
We do.
Now, I guess a year and a little bit more, based on all of this, we find the United Nations and the WHO specifically, which is the World Health Organization, which is basically the UN, it's an arm of the UN, they start talking about worldwide pandemic treaty.
That's right.
And, this has been dancing around countries. Some want a few changes, some want a few changes, but here, just down the road here in Parliament, Justin went a little bit from Parliament. Justin says, well, what if we took what's in the flu pandemic and made that into a bill?
That's right.
And that's what we have Bill C 293.
293. So we got a preview. Pretty much everything that we saw happening during the that's okay, they like it. During the scandemic is being encoded in a document that is a private member's bill. So that means that it was proposed by a citizen, a member, it could be anybody, right?
Sure.
And then endorsed by, I guess, a member of parliament. And that individual turned out to have, if you read Lisa Marone's Substack, to have gaslit her upon an email inquiry as to, what's the WHO, the World Health Organization, having to do with this. And that was dismissed as a conspiracy theory. But the World Health Organization is a branch of the United Nations, and they claim to have no direct influence. They just provide guidelines. And we know now, in researching this bill, actually many people have known long prior to that, that the World Health Organization does exert direct influence. And so essentially it's an arm of this whole idea of unelected, wealthy people who want to exert influence on, I guess you would say, properly elected government, and do as they please. That's concerning in itself. But when you actually read the language of the bill, it is so vague and so broad that it actually encompasses pretty much everything. And so it's almost a carte blanche in terms of what they can enact. So they being the Minister of Health of Canada, and then a duly appointed representative, a controller that would come from the public health of Canada.
Again, another official, unelected by ourselves,
Exactly.
being able to affect our lives.
Exactly.
And this is what we're seeing in this world, one person at a time.
Whatever happened to a participatory, liberal democracy? Forgive me using the word liberal, because the liberals are no longer liberal. They're essentially Marxists, as are the Democrats in the United States. So whatever happened to that and the people having a voice? And instead, you're getting a few individuals with a lot of influence and power through money and whatnot, and trying to exert that control. And
right.
So without, going too far in that direction, Derek, again, going back to the actual language of the bill, the language is very vague. So they don't define what a pandemic is. And basically, all you really need to do is declare that there's a risk of a pandemic, without even defining a threshold for risk. So the language is very vague. The breadth of the bill covers everything. And, one of their phrases is for people, animals, plants, ecosystem, and then the welfare interface, which is in the entire government interface. So by that, if you take an example, if you take examples from the scandemic, how they were communicating to us. Well, you want to know how they were communicating to us. Look at the National Citizens Inquiry testimony of Rodney Palmer with regards to what the CBC was actually promoting to the public and what was actually scientifically true. It is horrendous. The CBC should be more than just simply defunded. Okay, they should be held accountable for actually giving out information that was very harmful to people and potentially deadly. Okay, with regard to that.
Well, they also went a step further. They opinionated it, and they actually gave advice.
That's right.
As
Whatever happened to a news show
that just
presenting
said the facts.
a balanced presentation,
Factual, yep,
right?
yep.
Factual, sticking to the facts, and not being activists. So today, journalists are activists, essentially, right? You look at what's happening in the U.S., and there's politicians out there that cannot get asked a simple question without the individual opining. Look at the presidential debate recently, and that may very well have been set up in advance in terms of a rigging, when you have one individual seemingly playing against three individuals, okay? So back to the language of this bill, the Federal Bill C 293. So you look at communication, you look at if they want to promote a particular narrative, it's all laid out in the bill that they can do so. If they want to seize your property, they can do so. If they want to invoke the use of certain pharmaceuticals, they can do that because of the breadth of the language. I mean, it's too broad for me to cover here.
And incarceration.
And exactly. Incarceration, prosecution of individuals who speak out. I mean, we're already on that path. And if you take a look what's happened now in the UK, people being prosecuted for social media posts because of a clause about potential hate speech. So one thing we know about government, and that we had validated and reinforced during the last 4 years is when they can take an inch, they'll go for a mile. And any power that they get, they'll likely not give it back. So you look at the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, you have this notwithstanding clause, and you have the need to demonstrably justify the hand waving of our God-given rights and freedoms, right? In the Charter, the supremacy of God is primal, right? And so when you have these rights and freedoms become privileges or things that can be enacted if you behave well, then we lose the whole spirit. That's not why the Charter was drafted. Just talk to Brian about that, right? So
Brian Peckford.
yeah, Brian. Excuse me. Yeah. So now we have this document that, as we were saying, is basically a reflection of what they attempted to do over the last 4 years to begin with. And so I don't think the average Canadian is either willing or of the temperament like this. Maybe they just don't want to have to go through this because we feel we should be able to trust our government, public health, and my heart goes out to people who feel betrayed. And my heart goes out even more for people who still believe and are going to vote Liberal no matter what. You know what I mean?
It's astonishing, and the same with the media. Whether it's a case of self-isolation or they don't want to face the truth, it's difficult. But I do notice that people are kind of going through those stages. I've met people that are angry at Trump, not angry, and then there's some that, they're still in the denial stages. But we really have to bring this nation up to par. Yeah. And the other thing that's synonymous with this is we don't have a very functional media. So if I go ask anyone here, I guarantee you, 10 out of 10 people will not know what this bill is. But so this bill's got second reading. It comes here, and typically what should happen is the Senate reviews it, what they call more lines, as they put it, and they would send this back with recommendations. However, our Senate is of the same ideology as what produced the document. So it looks likely that forward that bill as it stands, right?
Yeah, we need to be realistic here, Derek. You know as well as I do that Senate is populated with some very loyal Liberal members, and it's been purposely populated in that way. And so, having passed the 3 readings in the Parliament, I wonder how many of the MPs actually read the bill or actually truly understand its implications. Because when you have something that broad and that vague, then you can push to enact certain laws or protocols that could really be very constraining to our rights and freedoms, freedom of expression, freedom of medical freedom, and pretty much all of it. So this is the danger, is that when you have a piece of legislation pushed through like this, you have to look at the potential for abuse. You can't just say, well, Nazis shouldn't be able to speak freely. Well, yeah, in order for freedom of speech to work, Nazis need to be able to speak just as Christians, just
there
as
goes our
Jews.
YouTube channels.
Yeah.
Using that word.
Sorry, I shouldn't have said that word.
Yeah, maybe not.
Okay, try
But this is the problem. We can't even say the word.
Yeah. But my point is that,
and I'm not even kidding,
whenever you freely express yourself, to quote Jordan Peterson, you risk offending, right? And where's that threshold of offense when people are claiming to be triggered and whatnot? When I grew up, if someone, if you were a child and you were getting bullied, right, you fought, you stood up for yourself, right? And I mean, look at me. Am I a white supremacist? No. Okay, right? Right. So it's like, there was racism, and I grew up with some racism. Okay, but I look at the intent, and I look at, and sometimes it was kids, and you get stronger for that, right?
Of course.
And so we live in a society where we have a lot of diversity, but I get concerned because when you try to forego or forget the values that our legal documents, our founding documents, were actually based on, then what is there left? When you try to make the state supreme and you get rid of the transcendent God that this whole thing was based on in the first place, right? Because it was based on Christian values, right? You do unto others as you have to do unto them. So under the law, we're all equal. Your rights and freedoms end where mine start.
Right.
Okay? And so this is how we should all be treated. Are we born equal? Of course not. Of course we're not born equal, but we need to be treated equal under the law, right?
And justice as well. That's the reason why the Lady Justice is blind.
Yes.
But the other thing now that complicates all of this is we're already starting to see a two-tiered justice system.
Yes.
And this bill with the two-tiered justice system is like two freight trains racing together simultaneously. So.
Well, I guess the question has to be, what can we do about this?
That's a really good question. So, you know, and I'm always thinking, what action can we possibly take here? Because sometimes you feel hopeless, right? Go to bed at night and you're wondering, well, this is way beyond my scope, it's all beyond my pay grade. These people are even potentially groomed for their positions. They're in these positions and they get a say, and my vote's going to be nullified by so-and-so's vote anyway. If I vote, you know, Conservative or PPC or whatever the case may be, then I'm just going to have 5 neighbors down the street vote Liberal and I'm going to be screwed. We can't think like that. We have to maintain a faith, we have to be positive, but we have to consistently take steps forward. You know, in Rocky, how they say 1 step forward, 1 punch, 1 round, 1 step, 1 punch, 1 round. So that's how we have to do. I'm not implying we have to be violent with the punch, okay, guys? But I am saying that we need to take action. And so here, for instance, there's a link on lawyer Lisa Marone's site where you click and you can actually communicate your desire to your senator, basically to the Senate, and let them know we don't. Now, is that going to be any good? I don't know. Do you know? Right?
So far it hasn't been.
But this is an avenue. Yeah, that's open to us.
Yeah.
What else? Doing podcasts.
Yeah.
Doing interviews, speaking out, being vociferous about this whole thing. We have to do that. And then potentially contacting members of parliament. You know, I've spoken to a couple of members of parliament, one Conservative and a few that were not. And I was appalled at how little they were able to express the facts of a situation. Not just the science, because I'm a scientist and a physician, but just the basic facts. And it wasn't even a question of debate. It was almost as if they didn't want to go there and that they were beholden to believe what they were being told by their party leader or even by the media. That's all reflected in the mainstream media or the mainstream media today, right? So when you have that kind of barrier, then it's natural to question, like, well, why are we supporting people that don't seem to even know what we talk about around our kitchen table?
I'm glad you said that, because this week I've had a conversation with an MP, and he didn't really know what Bill C-93 was. Didn't know. And unfortunately, like these members of parliament have really just become just a functioning vote of the leader.
Yeah.
And then it goes down. You vote this way or you're up.
And, you know, Derek, party cohesion goes even beyond that, right? Like, we saw that unholy alliance between Sellout Singh and the Liberals, and pardon for the use of the colorful language, but what the heck was he thinking, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a huge betrayal of not only his constituents, but as a Canadian population in general. And so you get this in order for the Liberals to be able to push through whatever laws that they want. Will there be a move if they're voted out to nullify all the bills that were passed under that unholy alliance? I don't know. I think that should really seriously be talked about.
Well, that's got to be a movement in itself.
Yes.
I mean, we got to have a movement that's going after these conservatives and saying, guys, look at all these bills. We something's gone wrong.
Yeah.
Let's get this right.
Yeah.
So,
but I don't know. As we were saying, like, when government gets a little bit, it's like, well, we'll keep that. Don't worry, we won't abuse it.
Yeah.
Right? We'll just keep it here.
So
close to
this
our
bill
chest.
293 this is what we're talking about, Bill C-293. It's been passed in the House.
Yep.
And it's now sitting for second reading
Yep.
today in the Senate.
Mhm.
Now, if that bill gets passed by the Senate, which it likely will,
Yeah.
we are then under, whenever this gets, I don't know,
it goes back,
goes
and
to
then the
Royal
Royal
Assent.
Assent to
And
become
then
law.
we're under the boot of that C-293,
Yeah.
which you're saying really gives the power to the Minister of Health.
It does. So the question is, will they enact it, and how far will they enact it? And so the Minister of Health then may have their work cut out for them in terms of, okay, how far can I go here? How vocal are the people going to get? But when you hear
You're talking about Mark Holland. He'll take it as far as he can.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Yeah.
So I think that if this all goes through, all of this, and we're already in second reading, did it get passed in the second reading today, or do you know?
I don't know.
So if it got passed second
we
reading
won't
today,
know till about 4 o'clock.
it goes back to the House and gets Royal Assent. That could mean within a very short period of time, we're under this bill 293 of a pandemic response bill that says they can, as you say, it's a very wide ranged language that they really can come down on us in any way. Your expression, you will no longer be able to talk about this.
Yeah. Anything that you saw done over the course of the last 4 years in terms of the government overreach, in terms of the public health narrative that was pushed, in terms of the literal wrong information. I don't like using that term misinformation because that was originally coined by
I don't
the
like it
CIA
either.
to
Thank
describe,
you. I
the
don't
Kennedy
like it.
assassination, people that were trying to figure out what happened there. So it's a loaded term now, and you can almost say that the term misinformation means not government approved information, right?
Yeah.
So it's literally giving out the wrong information, harmful information to people, information that stuck to their narrative, and then wanting that control. This bill does everything to ensure that that remains within their capacity officially, not just, well, we have an emergency now, we're going to do this.
Right.
No, they're going to be able to declare an emergency just solely based on a perceived risk. What threshold that is, how it's defined, is you know as much as I do. And that's
And it,
purposeful.
in your opinion, after reading this, is very open-ended. This
It's
risk
extremely open-ended.
threshold and their definition about what is a pandemic.
That's right.
So
That's
we're
right.
in big trouble.
Climate can be declared that.
Yeah.
They could go after farmers in the way they tried in the Netherlands. They could go after the food supply in other ways. They could insist that a certain percentage of flour out there be cricket flour. People do not eat crickets. Chitin is very bad.
Don't
for you.
eat crickets.
There are substances in bugs. There's a reason why, you have multiple steps in that food chain that we are required in order to process, or in order to ecologically metabolize, whatever term you want to use, for humans to be able to consume food. Not at the bug level, okay, guys?
But we
don't
know
go for the bug
already
level.
that they use cricket flour in products.
What's it called? There's a name for it. It starts with the letter A. So try not to make it sound like crickets, but
I've heard it. I can't remember it, but
me too.
I will add it to the post, everybody. It'll
please
come
do.
to me as soon as I start watching.
And just on that note, I have 2 family members that work at the cricket farm in London.
Yeah.
And the reason why they're not posting out product yet is because of what you just said.
Okay.
They haven't been able to remove the harmful
There you go.
products,
Yeah.
the harmful things that are in crickets.
Yeah.
So they haven't been able to make at that factory, human grade crickets yet.
When you think about what it would take for someone to try to insist that the majority of the population consume bugs, well, they don't.
Oh, a
Right?
sheda
It's
powder.
like taking my private jet.
Here, it's called a
Davos,
sheda powder.
and- that's it, a sheda. ACHETA, powder.
Thank
so
you.
it's cricket powder, essentially. So thank you
One
very
of
much.
our
for that.
producers
Yes.
is getting us
Yes.
information.
Thank you, Madam Producer. When you try to understand what's happening, right, Derek?
Yeah.
So you try to put yourself in the shoes. Okay, I've got $10 billion, or I've got X number of $1 million. How do I perceive the rest of the population? Well, it kind of depends on how you got the money, right? If you're a big trust fund baby, AKA, right?
Exactly.
That might, But I'm not trying to make excuses. But you try to put yourself in those shoes, and you think, how would I perceive the rest of the population? Well, probably the rules and laws do not apply to them. See, and so you can just discuss these things like water off a duck's back. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
When Yuval Harari, the historian who was Klaus Schwab's right-hand man,
I saw him on Friday night, actually.
you did?
Yeah, but good. Sorry, go
No,
finish
but
your sentence.
you listen to him talking about how essentially the population are hackable animals.
Yeah.
Do you want to believe that you're a hackable animal? Well, you are. You are animalistic in the sense that we are organisms and we have physiological mechanisms, and they are susceptible to certain things. If you give someone cyanide, they're going to die at a certain dosage level. We require food, we require air, we require water, we require rest. Okay. Now, does that make you a hackable animal? No, I believe that humans are beyond that. We have this free will, which he says is not real, right? And God is dead. But I believe we have this connection to the unknown. And I believe it's in our best interest to maintain that type of faith, because I think it allows us to see things and do things that we otherwise might not be able to do. And so we can go beyond that. If you believe you're a hackable animal, you are. If you don't, and you are willful and you choose to direct your own destiny, I think then you are able to break those bonds. But if you subject yourself to poisonous pharmaceuticals and foods and video games, and you need that dopamine hit all the time, you're playing into that system, you're playing into those pathways of hackability. And then you you may not be that much better than than an insect or an ant, to quote Daniel Dennett when I used to study this stuff back in the 80s and 90s. Dating myself now, but we have to be really careful because there is a certain aspect that can be exploited if we let them exploit it.
Yeah.
Those things about us that are animalistic, but we can rise above that. We have to understand we have these tendencies. Yeah, we need food, we need water, we need and sexual behavior and stuff. But you don't want those things exploited or abused.
No.
Right?
But I think one of the greatest things in humanity is our free will. Just think of what's been accomplished by people that have had free will.
Yeah.
That have just said, no, I'm not listening to you. I believe it's this way. And they've worked on it, and they were proven right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the greatest things of humanity.
And what would motivate someone to do that in the absence of objective, evidence that I'm getting close to, Thomas Edison, right? And trying to create the light bulb. It's like 1,800 tries or something, and the reporter says to him, it's like, you failed, so many times. He goes, no, I'm one step closer. I'm one bulb closer. I'm 1,800 attempts closer to getting what I want, what I need. But again, we have to be so careful because there are people that talk about free will is a figment of your imagination. I think Sam Harris talked about that. And it's like, you can choose to believe that. And you can delve into, the mechanisms, quantum gravity and the Emperor's New Mind and all this stuff. Originally, this is what I was studying. And the point is that I think there'll always be that need for faith. I think that you can try to explain everything as scientifically as possible, but there's always that, human knowledge is objective and it's abstract, right? We say objective meaning we're classifying, quantifying, but it is essentially abstraction. Is it reality? No, in as much as a circle is reality. Is there such thing as a perfect circle or a perfect triangle? No, that's a figment of our imagination in mathematics. But in terms of reality around us, there's no such thing as perfection in that way. But we have to understand, and I could go on forever here, and I'm going to lose my train of thought in a moment because I want to talk about that bill. But we have to understand that humans are more than what we're being accused of being, and how they're trying to exploit that aspect of us. It's actually quite depressing, and it actually shows you okay, well, when they say by 2030 you will own nothing and you'll be happy, well, who's going to own it? They're going to own it.
Exactly.
Right? There's going to be ownership, it's just not us.
State ownership.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's the totalitarianism. That's the supremacy of the state, or the corporate, stakeholders. And this is fascism, the joining of companies, so these individuals with all the money, and government together. That's fascism, right? So nothing has changed, right? It's just the players have changed.
Well, on the subject of hackable, I know that he's talking about sort of more, chips in your brains and sort of hackable in that way.
Yeah, the transhumanist thing.
The transhumanism.
Really
but the fact is we are sort of being hackable because we're so easily manipulated. And we've been going this path of accepting this manipulation with, as you say, games and TV shows and food. And they just keep feeding us their narrative. And they have, the biggest weapon is human fear.
Yes.
So they say, oh, guess what? There's a pandemic, and there is, a virus, and there's climate change, and there's whatever they pick. And a good part of society runs on that fear.
Mm-hmm.
And this is our problem, is how do we get past that? Because we do have natural fear, and we need to have that. And they're using that against us.
Yeah, the absence of fear is foolhardiness, right? Courage is doing the right thing in the face of fear, as they say. So you have to personally try to educate yourself. Now, let me ask you, if you were mind controlled, would you know it?
Well, I guess not.
Well, that's always been an argument for, you could be mind controlled. But I say to that, yeah, I'm open to the possibility. And that openness to the possibility that I'm somehow being manipulated either directly, overtly, or subtly keeps me on my toes. Will I ever know for sure? Heck, all this could be a matrix.
Yes,
but
of course.
I choose to believe that there is some direct consequence to how I behave here, how I treat my fellow man, and what I fight for. And that's my choice, right? You can choose not to. You can choose to sit on the couch 18 hours a day and eat your Doritos and do your non-exercise and whatnot. But it's so
with this, with this bill C-293, they are using this natural fear that as humans we have, and using this very wide, without a threshold for risk that you've seen in this bill. And they're going to use all whatever fear that they choose to use, whether it's climate change or a virus or the chickens are falling from the sky. It doesn't even really matter what they use, because they've given themselves this full authority to implement whatever they choose, and they control the media. And this is where we sit.
And this is where they're pushing our fear buttons. But not only our fear buttons, guys, compassion. Under the guise of compassion,
that's a good one to bring up. You don't want to hurt grandma.
No, you don't. But as Rujane Killian said, Dr. Rujane Killian, she said, but did anybody ask grandma if they wanted to, have done to them what?
That's a very good point.
No, grandma wouldn't want to sacrifice the children for herself, right? So nobody asked grandma.
Yeah.
But we have to be very careful, because things that seem to be done in the spirit of goodness and righteousness, whatever, they can be exploited and perverted, or ultimately they're not for the good. They're to get the common man and woman to endorse it, because yes, everyone should get vaccinated so that everyone's protected and everyone. Well, wait a minute, I don't want to be injected with this because based on my research, this hasn't been tested properly. So even if the shots worked the way they originally claimed, it was wrong to try to force people to get them.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, of course, don't forget though, while I never forced anyone to take care of it.
Yeah.
No, you damn well did, because you forced people to make a decision between their
and
livelihood.
As you said earlier, they
children.
did that under an emergency. They called this emergency, and worldwide, really. But this 293 expands that.
And it legalizes
this is,
Because
and
right
this
now,
is the problem.
Right, so you look at the Emergency Act and the federal court basically concluding and ruling that it was illegally implemented. Well, this bill expands, I'm not talking about the act specifically, but the general premise of, okay, let's call an emergency because everyone's at risk here and we want to do the safe thing. Who was it? Benjamin Franklin that said anyone who sacrifices freedom for security and safety doesn't deserve any of it, right? And it's like, you can't do that. The primacy of freedom of expression and personal freedom and medical freedom must come first, to the extent that your rights and freedoms don't infringe on mine. And so, yeah, you could argue there's a bit of interpretation, and I don't want you standing next to me because you didn't get the shot. Wait a minute. We got to have all the facts here, first of all. And then there's so many things that you can do to take action where, okay, let's just protect the vulnerable. Let's just minimize the risk of the people that are really, but they purposely did not age stratify the data. There's always something that was not done or something that was twisted in order to justify the next step for control. So this was used any way you cut it. Was it an accidental release? No, I personally don't. There's clearly gain of function research done here and everything. But even if you just look at it and in terms of, okay, we have this situation, it was definitely exploited. It was definitely used as a test, this whole scandemic, in order to check for compliancy.
Well, I think that's the point right there, that it was used as a test.
Absolutely.
And they were successful, very successful in the test, and now they're taking this further with this new bill.
There's evidence that there's been some changes in how people think and feel. If you listen to Dr. Nels and the whole idea of being unable to write new memories, the hippocampus is damaged from the shots and this and that. People are thinking differently, even culturally. Like I grew up in Ottawa and I'm used to going to Canada Day, biggest party of the year, like woo, right?
Yeah.
So then you come out here, you've got these fences, you've got snipers on every rooftop, and barely any people out on a beautiful day for Canada Day. What's up, right? What's up? Fear. Right? Changing.
But this bill might give us the opportunity as a teachable thing with these people to finally realize, read that bill.
Absolutely.
And see what our future holds.
And if you don't want to read the bill, read a bill from read the analysis. Like I said, one of them is lawyer Lisa Marone. She did a fantastic job of breaking it down, multiple posts on her Substack. Check that out, okay? Lawyer Lisa, Substack.com. And there's some podcasts associated with that as well. There's individuals out there looking at this. Bruce Party, he's a friend. He was a law professor as well, breaking this down. And I have a podcast, The Fifth Doctor. I haven't addressed this directly, but we've talked about it on there. I called it The Fifth Doctor because historically I went with the 4 out of 5 doctors often didn't give good advice. right? 9 out of 10 physicians recommend Camel cigarettes, for instance, right? I just went with fifth doctor because
Right.
I needed something, but that's the point.
So
is
you're
that
is it a what kind of channel? Substack or is
It's a
it
Rumble
a Rumble
channel.
channel?
Rumble
So
channel.
Rumble
So the reason
channel.
why
We'll
I
put a
posted
link
that
to
too,
that.
yeah,
But
I
it's
really
called the
appreciate
Fifth
that.
Doctor.
I appreciate
Okay,
that.
absolutely.
Like we don't receive any money for doing this
No,
or
of
anything, but
course.
we got to get the word out there,
Yeah.
right?
It's all
And
about awakening. Awakening.
yeah, and unfortunately, the more you dig, the more you see certain dominoes have been set some time ago, and sometimes decades or longer ago, and that's very startling because like for me, maybe 10 years ago, I was pretty apolitical, right? I knew what I liked to do. I knew what I was interested in. I had my hobbies. I always liked learning new things, but when you go down a path because something doesn't seem right and you feel compelled to investigate, and in my case, it was looking at the history of the Democratic Party in the United States, and I'm like, wow, you look at these sources, it says this, and you look at these sources, you can do that with pretty well anything. And because I had the science background, it was easier for me to look at some scientific things. And so when this whole scandemic was being declared, and you look at what steps were being taken, and you could see they're talking out of one side of the mouth and smiling out the other. And 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And there are literally voices now that get us physically ill. When I listen to Dr. Anthony Fauci speak, I get physically ill. When I listen to our illustrious left dishonorable leader, I get physically ill because of
You're not alone.
Well, there you go,
know that.
right? And
Not
it's
alone
just
on that
it's
one.
almost surreal
It is very strange.
what they feel they can get away with and yet have been getting away
They
with.
have, and this proves that they think that they can get away with more to the point that it's gone through the House and it's now in second reading in the Senate.
And then
it's
you
gone
realize-
that far very quickly without very many people knowing
Realize
anything
that
about
this
it.
is pushed by people. They're not better than you. I used to think,
course
it
not.
took a very special kind of person to be a politician. Yeah, I still believe that, but in a negative sense. There may be some good ones out there. I've met a couple. I like Max Bernier. I know him and we chat, and I think he's fighting for the right values. Okay. I've met Pierre Poilievre. He was a friend, family friend for a family that I was very close to, and he seemed like a nice guy. But I don't know him, right? I don't know him.
Yeah.
And so we don't really know these people. But it's pretty easy to see that many of them, either they're hiding what they really know, or they just don't want to know, or they really don't know about things that you and I talk about very easily, and they can't even be bothered to look something up. I know people that have sent essays and videos and literal proof about the adverse and deadly effects of the gene shots, and not get a response. Or I heard from one politician that, oh no, I don't look at any of that stuff. I let my staff handle that. It's like, really? Then why are you in office? If you can't look at things your constituents are sending you, you don't deserve to be in office if you don't listen to them. And you can't tell me that you're not sensing there's something awry, that there's something going on here, above and beyond what would be normal functioning, of government. It's like, no, there's clearly an agenda here to get much more control and to push aside the charter and to push aside the Constitution and to push aside the Bill of Rights and to push us, you know what I mean? There's a clearly this effort, this action to do so. Why? Well, to give people that were not elected, that are influencing those who are elected, even more power. And when you get that small group of people up there on Parliament Hill or over here in the Senate, and they're being unduly influenced monetarily, or possibly other means, we don't know for sure, and they're only human. They're only human. And so we have to deal with that. We have to talk back. We have to educate ourselves. We have to do the right thing, as I mentioned in an upcoming book chapter. We have to be able to not turn away and say, this is going to fix itself. I'm going to watch Netflix. Okay? We can't do that, guys. We're going to look back on this in time and go, what were you doing when, the Emergency Act was declared during the convoy? What were you doing when the election was held in Canada? What were you doing when God knows what's going to happen in the United States?
Yeah.
Given everything that's gone on down there. A second assassination attempt on former President Trump, and yet they're claiming he's the one inciting violence?
Yeah.
What the hell?
Yeah.
When you're saying that someone is a danger to democracy in the world, you're absolutely inciting violence.
I think
toward that
those of
person.
us that are sort of on this side of this conversation, including you know, our side of this conversation, we know that the world's been turned upside down in some insane way.
Yeah, as
And-
Tucker
and
Carlson says,
our-
a moral inversion.
Yeah,
It
it's
is a
time for
moral
action now.
inversion, and somehow we've got to right this. And this is a very difficult job. And the fact that this bill is already in second reading in the Senate is very frightening to me.
Yeah, how did that happen?
How did that happen
You turn
without
your
us
back
even
and boom,
knowing? Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So, and it's like you feel you can't even sleep
Yeah.
because you're going to miss
You're
something.
gonna miss
and that's
something.
done purposely.
Yeah, this is
Right.
warfare.
Yep.
This is a sense of warfare.
Yeah, it's
and how
lawfare,
do we
right?
battle this?
Lawfare.
It's
Yeah.
lawfare.
Totally.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know, thank you for saying bringing this to our attention and our
Yeah, I'm sorry. It was a
listeners.
little more than.
No,
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 this
that's all-
was-
it's
this
all
was
good.
great.
Yeah,
I can
thank you.
assure. I think I have almost over 1,000 people watching.
Oh, no
Wow.
way. Hi, guys.
Yeah,
Thanks so much for
yeah,
tuning
so-
in.
Yeah, I
That's
don't.
very
Yeah.
Final
helpful.
thoughts?
Yeah. So.
Final thoughts. Well, you know what? It's an honor to be out here with you all on the hill. Paul, I say the hill, but really,
And Lynn.
and Lynn, and I know
Yeah,
that, and,
yeah,
and
okay.
Derek, and Butch, and Priscilla, right over there.
They're
so,
over there.
You guys, you're doing great work, and you're doing God's work, and why is it that so few will step up? I want to talk to those people in positions of influence like physicians. I want to talk to them. What can you do in your small way? Look, I get it. You don't want to bite the hand that feeds you. I get it. But when you see an overt wrong being done, how long can you listen to that source knowing better? Through inaction, people die.
Yeah. Were you at the symposium in Whitby the other last
Oh,
week?
was
No.
it?
So somebody brought up the idea, I forget who, about having that same type of thing, but more directed to doctors, like doctors would be in the audience. And it would be kind of a way to bring them on board a little bit further in. And I thought that would probably be a pretty good idea.
I went to medical school later in life as a kind of a second undertaking, and I didn't have to. And my mindset has always been one to question. And going back to school, more mature, I didn't look it, I don't show my age, but things really changed. And I realized I was sitting there listening to lectures and listening to people and questioning where all this came from and wondering how much they understood where it came from. But I went to med school with some, what I believe to be very good people, okay, that I find it hard to believe they would go out and intentionally hurt and harm. So it's not quite as black and white as many of us would like to believe.
I don't necessarily
Right?
think that they intentionally did that. I
Right.
think they were just
No,
wrapped up
fact,
in the same
they
thing.
didn't. In fact, they may
Yeah.
be doing what they're doing or not doing what they're doing
Yeah.
in order to help people.
Right.
And you keep telling yourself that
Yeah.
time, and we're all guilty of trying to convince ourselves of something sometime in our life and wishful thinking, but it's gone really way too far. Okay? I mean, the world is at stake here, literally.
Yeah.
Right? And if you listen to Denis Rancourt, full professor of physics, and a statistical whiz, Denis Rancourt, physicists need to know their stats, depending on the area, but there's entire fields of physics that require a really deep understanding of statistics. He's one of those profs, okay? And he conservatively stated 17 million people dead directly due to the jabs. Okay? I mean, what the hell?
Yeah.
Right?
It's not,
Genocide,
yeah.
however you want to phrase it.
The mainstream media is not
Yeah.
sharing this information.
No, of course
so
not.
the
And so
regular, what I say,
You
the
bring up
regular
another
people-
point.
Yeah.
How can these people who claim to go into a profession to expose the truth sit there and stare at the camera and read off lies?
No, that's what we're talking
And
about.
go
There's
home
this
at night.
inversion of truth. This is
Right?
the problem.
And so, what's going through their minds and hearts? You wonder, right? There are individuals who've stood up, like Ivory Hecker. I interviewed her, young 31-year-old woman at the time, who just said, F this, I am not, going to sit down and take this. They need to let me talk about ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. That was June of 2020, very early on, okay? And others have been inspired by that and followed suit. And then you've got CBC whistleblowers. You've got the Rodney Palmers. You've got it's Anusha, another
Yeah.
CBC director.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, forgive me for.
Yeah, I know who you mean. but-
Yeah, and there's many who have come forward. There's freedom doctors like Michael
Yeah.
Alexander. There's lawyers. There's freedom physicians. You know them.
Yeah.
And how many of them have been able to endure this? Well, there's Dr. Charles Hoff and Dr. Mark Trozy, who are still unresolved and left standing. Others have suffered terribly and taken, paid fines and whatnot, and
lost their licenses,
lost their
reputations,
and then there's
absolutely.
others that are working to try and make a better system, like Dr. Rougenet Killian and her husband Aubrey, who's a lawyer. Okay, and we need to look at these possibilities, because when the boards and the certifying bodies and the regulatory bodies fail because of these conflicts of interest, you need to look elsewhere. Can that be fixed? I don't know. It doesn't look like it.
Yeah.
Because these things have happened over a long period of time. They were allowed to happen due to what? Human greed. Okay? They allow conflicts of interest that you would never allow in a minor hockey league game. Okay? Or you're in recess in the schoolyard. Okay? Kids understand conflict of interest better than what's actually occurring with regulatory bodies all over. Right? These tremendous built-in integral conflicts of interest. How can anything be done objectively? How can anything be done fairly or truthfully when these things are just, they're built into the system, right? So then now what do we do? What do we do? It's almost like everything has to come down, but you don't want to cause that kind of devastation. This is absolutely,
I always use the term torrential warfare, and this is what this is. We're going to go step by step. We're going to get more attention onto this bill,
and hopefully, this isn't the last of it, right? So it likely will pass in the Senate, and then we still have to be vocal about this, because this is a horribly ominous, potentially. It's a totalitarian bill. Is what it truly
totally is.
But so I urge Canadians to really look at it. I've given you some resources. You guys are going to be posting links.
Yeah.
Look at it for yourself. Look at the language. Understand the potential. You always have to look at new legislation in terms of how can it be used or misused. And the more vague and broad it is, the more it can be used and misused. And you can bet the politicians will do this in order to achieve whatever ends they've decided are theirs. And they may not be objective with that. They may be under the influence of others who are giving them money or influence or power.
I'll actually be
blackmailing.
posting that actual bill as well. A link to the actual
Yeah,
bill
we'll
that people
have a
can
look at
download
that
it, read
then.
it themselves,
Right.
find out what it is, and let's start cracking.
Yeah.
I hate reading legalese. Okay, I hate it. I can read a scientific paper more easily than I can, legal stuff. It's like, oh my God, this language, the syntax. Oh, what am I doing? But it's necessary to educate yourself. And if you don't want to go through at that level, subscribe to someone that you trust that can translate it for you.
And with that, what was the name of your Rumble channel?
Well, mine is the Fifth Doctor, Fifth. Like 4 out of 5 doctors often gave bad recommendations in the past. The Fifth Doctor on Rumble. I founded that in the middle of 2021 because my videos on YouTube had all been deleted, basically. So I was doing interviews even before this pandemic, back 2017, 2018, 2019, and then started doing some interviews before the scandemic was declared, talking about we could not use the word virus because YouTube was censoring the word virus, and they seemed to have some kind of audio algorithm that would detect it, and then they would blot out the entire
So
audio.
there you use that N word, and who knows?
So like I interviewed Pierre Corey in 2020 when he made his first Senate address for the shots for ivermectin, and I interviewed Peter McCullough very early on too, and several others, and well, they were treated, they were deleted. There's some stuff still up on BitChute. There's the occasional YouTube video that popped up, and I realized that no, I got to do something a little bit more formalized. And so I'm on Rumble. Very, very low production values, guys.
Yeah, well,
it's more about the
us.
information.
Look at us.
It's all about information.
Right on,
Just like
I'll
that.
send my viewers there.
Yes.
I'm going to
Thank
shut
you.
her down and
Thank
save
you.
some battery.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
I want to
Sam.
check out yours as well. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you.
very
Larry.
Dr. Sam, the best.
Just call me Sam.
All right,
All
Sam.
right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
I'm not in good shape like you are, that's for sure. I can't even see
Oh,
it.
it's very easy to get
So we're
to.
here in the Senate, and if you can get that and share that, I know it's a lot in this day and age of swipe, but here we are at the Senate building, and so it's into the second reading. So we should hear that sometime soon. Whatever happened to the second reading, there's a lot of sun on there. There you go. And so across the street, so Chateau Laurier, and of course the Parliament buildings. So just every little bit of information out there, the more you can share it, the, you know, maybe, just maybe you'll get to one voice that, so yeah, even one voice here says, and we have a look at that bill 293. This is the Canadian version, I guess, of the WHO kind of pandemic response bill, and it's going to the second reading here in the Senate, and likely it'll, we don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if it gets passed, and we'll be under the,
Follow CPAC around 4 o'clock.
what's that?
Go to CPAC after 4 o'clock to see if there's any updates on the bill.
We'll find the information pretty darn soon.
Yeah.
And we'll be under the boot of that bill. And it sounds from what Dr. Sam there is saying that it is a very broad bill and giving lots and lots of power to the government, especially the Minister of Health, which right now is Mark
Hey,
Holland.
Nancy.
So, you know, I wouldn't put my, I don't know, I wouldn't put a sick rat in the care of Mark Holland. Okay, so I'm going to say bye to Dr. Sam. Bye. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thanks again.